Shabbat Shalom. I hope all is well with you, especially spiritually. Today we are looking at Parsha Va'et Kanan. Va'et Kanan is the Hebrew word for "and I pleaded." Remember that the va in the beginning, that's a vav, often is indicative of the word and. This is from Devarim chapter 3, verse 23, verse 7, or chapter 7, verse 11. And I besought the Lord at that time, saying, O Lord God, you have begun to show your servant your greatness and your strong hand. For what God is there in heaven or on earth that can do according to your works and according to your mighty acts? These words, of course, on the part of Moshe was a plea to God to be allowed to enter the land of promise. But God continued to deny his request, stating that he would see the land of promise, but he would not enter it. This parasha also continues Moshe's review of the Torah, as he describes the Exodus and the giving of the Torah, declaring them to be unprecedented in human history. We're told that future generations of Israel will turn away from God, that they will worship idols, and they will be sent into exile, scattered among the Goyim. But in the diaspora, God promises us that he will be to us a little sanctuary. He will be our refuge. We will seek him from that place, and we will return to our own land. Ultimately, we will all be restored to our relationship with him, as well as to our land. This parasha concludes with the repetition of the 10 words and the Shema, which declares the fundamental basis of our faith in the one true God, the God of Israel. Our Haftorah reading for this week is from Yeshayahu, and it's a kind of responsa to the tragic state of affairs that are outlined in our Torah reading. It's a stirring directive from Hashem. Take note of these words and the tone of the words. Comfort, oh, comfort my people, says your God. Speak kindly or gently or lovingly to Jerusalem, and call out to her that her warfare has ended and that her iniquity has been removed, that she has received of the Lord's hand double for all her sins. And a voice is calling, clear the way for the Lord in the wilderness, make smooth in the desert a highway for our God. Let every valley be lifted up, every mountain and hill made low. Let the rough ground become a plain, the rugged terrain a broad valley. For then the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all flesh will see it together. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Dramatic words. But what is the core meaning of these words God has spoken. First of all, God points to a future time, reminding us always that it is He who cares for us. Although we as a people have wandered away from Him, He is still our shepherd, the one described by Melech David in Tehillim 23. Because the Lord is my shepherd, I have everything I need. He allows me to rest in the meadow grass and leads me beside the quiet streams. He gives me new strength. He helps me do what honors Him the most. Even when walking through the dark valley of death, I will not be afraid, for You are close beside me, guiding all the way. You lay a well-filled table before me as my enemies watch. You have welcomed me as Your guest. Blessings overflow. Your goodness and unfailing kindness shall be with me all my life, and afterwards I will live with You forever in Your home. God is our shepherd. He is Adonai Ro-eh. One of the problems that I find most people face in relating to God is that they really don't have a very clear picture of who He is. And of course, anytime we're relating to anyone, this can be a dilemma, because if we don't actually know the person, it's difficult for us to know what is expected of us and how to proceed in our relationship with him or her. With our limited imaginations, we picture God as He is sometimes portrayed by artists as an elderly gentleman with a long, white, flowing beard, seated in a very large, elaborately carved chair. Or we may confuse Him with our earliest religious experiences, whatever they might have been. And to those who somehow are said to represent God, like the Pope, you may see Him in the way you view your own father. Many people do. Was He absent, well-meaning, emotionally detached, weak, stressed, nice, but by no means perfect? Our people with whom God has an intimate relationship have had precisely the same sort of problem. Although we've known Him for a very long time, and we've known Him as the lawgiver, the judge, the eternal one, the creator, and as our king. As a people, we have no clear, true impression of His nature and His character. Our rabbis in Yavna, post 135 CE, began to codify the oral traditions with which mostly Rav Yeshua, Rav Shaul would have been so familiar. This process continued as the existent synagogue replaced the destroyed temple. Torah obedience, as explained by the rabbis and through the so-called oral Torah, became an end in and of itself, as defined by the rabbis rather than by God. As time passed, we as a people have grown more and more detached, more alienated from the reality of His presence. We've come to focus more on traditions than on Hashem Himself. Melech David knew God personally and intimately. God was a reality in his life from the time he was a young boy caring for his father's sheep. And he wrote about God using God's personal identity, Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, which defines God as I am, one who has always been and will always be. In Jewish thought, the ineffable tetragrammaton, the unutterable name composed of Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, was rarely, if ever, pronounced. We feared that we would arouse God's anger or might become overly familiar with the one who was indeed all-powerful. And too often today, people tend to be overfamiliar with God, as if he was our buddy or our neighbor. Instead, we substituted another word, either Elohim, which is a generic name for God. We often use Eloheinu, which means our God, or Adonai, which means Lord. Or we use Yah, a shortened form of the name or identity. Please note that he is not Jehovah, as there is absolutely no J sound in Ivrit. No Jerusalem, no Judah, Yehuda, Yerushalayim. All of these references to God are used rightly throughout the scriptures, and they are appropriate and proper for us to use today. When Melech David wrote Tehillim 23, he was writing from his own personal experience with God. Shepherd is a modest term, unlike king, but it is heavily weighted with meaning, especially to someone like David. Alone in desert places, the young man who would become Israel's greatest king learned to know God, to really know God, and to trust God implicitly. David, who also had a prophetic gift, expounded throughout the Psalms both on the meaning of the word shepherd and on his own personal experience with God. And we can read that, and we should read the Psalms regularly because they are a source of great inspiration from someone, many of them written by Melech David, but from psalmists who understood and knew God personally. Why a shepherd, you ask? Well, as David was watching his sheep, it came to him that our God is like a shepherd. David had to give his own sheep unceasing care, watching over them in the same way that God provides constant care for his flock, his people Israel, the sheep of his pasture, denoting our helplessness and our defenselessness, our foolishness when we stray from safe paths, our constant need for guidance and discipline as well as for provision and security. David thought of the time and patience that was needed before his sheep would trust and follow him, as God takes time with us and is patient with us so that we will know we can trust and follow him. He takes into account our timidity and insecurity, our stubbornness and our willful determination, our lack of predictability, and our capriciousness. As with David and his own sheep, God leads us through dangerous places filled with potential enemies and perilous surroundings. He rescues us from the scrapes into which we so often manage to get ourselves. God fights for us, and he guards us from harm. He brings us to the place of pasture and quiet pools where we can experience security and provision. All good shepherds know their sheep by name. There's nothing impersonal about their care. Even when intermingled with sheep from another flock, the shepherd can always select his own sheep. Shepherds stay close to their sheep, seeking out the one that strays and returning it to the security of the fold. A good shepherd would never leave his sheep alone, unlike little Bo Peep and her sheep. Little Bo Peep has lost her sheep and can't tell where to find them. Leave them alone and they'll come home, wagging their tails behind them. This children's rhyme represents a naive and irresponsible optimism. Don't worry, they'll find their way home eventually. But listen to the next verse of this nursery rhyme. Maybe you've never heard it. Maybe you didn't even know there was a second verse. Little Bo Peep fell fast asleep and dreamed she heard them bleating. But when she awoke, she found it a joke, for still they all were fleeting. Unlike Bo Peep, the Good Shepherd knows that his sheep will be lost without him and that his presence is their assurance. He who keeps Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Other biblical personalities also use the metaphor of the shepherd in relationship to God. Our father Yaakov, who was a shepherd himself, was the first person to speak of God in this way. He said, "God has been my shepherd all my life to this day." That, of course, was at the end of his life. Bereshit 48:15. Yirmiyahu, the prophet, saw God as the shepherd who would restore Israel. My people have been lost sheep. Their shepherds have led them astray and caused them to roam on the mountains. They wandered over mountain and hill and forgot their own resting place. But I will bring Israel back to his own pasture. Of Yisrael, Yechezkel wrote, "For this is what the sovereign Lord says, I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. As a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he is with them, so I will look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all the places where they were scattered on a day of clouds and darkness. I will tend them in a good pasture There they will lie down in good grazing land, and there they will feed in a rich pasture. I myself will tend my sheep and have them lie down, declares the sovereign Lord. I will search for the lost and bring back the strays. I will bind up the injured and strengthen the weak. Yechezkel, although not the shepherd of sheep, had the task of shepherding the exiles of Yehuda in Babylon. Like Yeshayahu, he describes them as scattered sheep because they had no shepherd, no one who would search for them and restore them to their fold. No one cared for them with a true shepherd's heart. But the good shepherd searches for his sheep and he finds them. He carefully examines each animal, recognizing the signs of pain, distress, abuse, mistreatment, fear. In his compassion, he binds up the wounds, applying the balm that will make each member of his flock whole again. Yeshua describes himself, as a shepherd in Yochanan 10. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd who owns the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he's a hired hand, and he cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. Mashiach Yeshua is the good shepherd who represents to us the mercy, rachamim, and the love, chesed, in fact, all of the divine attributes of God. He came to seek and to save those who were lost, to look for the one that wandered away. These terms could only be used of those who are already part of his flock, the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But Rav Yeshua also said, other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. What does he say about them? He says, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. Rav Yeshua has a shepherd's heart, filled with love and compassion for his own sheep. There's no price too great for him to pay, including laying down his life. Rav Yeshua has a shepherd's eye. He takes in the whole of the flock, and he misses nothing and no one. He sees even the poor, confused sheep dangerously wandering on the mountainside, far away from the rest of the flock. He sees all this. Yeshua has a shepherd's faithfulness, as God is always faithful. He will never forsake or leave comfortless even one of his sheep. He will not flee when he sees the wolf ready to attack. Instead, he will defend and protect. Rav Yeshua has a shepherd's strength. He is well able to deliver us from the jaws of the lion or the paws of the bear, or from any adversary that comes against us. No threat is too great for him to overcome. Yeshua has a shepherd's tenderness and gentleness. No lamb is so lost that he will not seek it out and lift it into his arms. None is so weak that he will leave it behind, and none is so tired that he will not provide it with the rest it needs. The shepherd provides rest and renewal for his flock. God does not leave those who belong to him to their own devices. Through gentle persuasion, he patiently encourages us to the place where hunger and thirst will be satisfied. Left to ourselves, we would wander off into the wilderness and die. But he urges us toward the oasis with familiar, verdant pasture and cool streams where we can feed and rest. The word David uses for lying down means stretched out, relaxed, completely at rest, unafraid, content. We have all seen our pets or other animals lying in this way, completely at peace. God, our shepherd, makes the first move towards us. He seeks us. He takes the initiative. He calls us and he leads us to a place of rest. It's not because we are seeking God, but because he seeks us that we find rest and comfort. God misses you when you stray from the fold. He can't bear to be separated from any of those who truly belong to him. You are always on his mind and in his heart. Even though he has many other sheep, you are precious to him. So he patiently, insistently calls you and seeks you out. Deep within each of us is a dedicated space only for God. Human beings were created to worship and obey Hashem and to walk with him. Without his love, we ache with loneliness and emptiness, even if we do not know it. As Melech David wrote in Tehillim 27:8, my heart says of you, seek his face. Your face, Adonai, I will seek. There is a hunger in the human heart which only God can satisfy. God himself is our provision for all things. If you're feeling weary, if you're feeling poorly, if you're feeling driven, stressed, anxious, God is your provision. Do not work for food that spoils, Yeshua said, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will never go hungry, and he who believes in me will never be thirsty. Through Mashiach Yeshua's sacrificial atonement, through Torah and study of the scriptures and through time with God in prayer, we can be nourished and our thirst quenched. Whatever pain is in your heart, God alone can deal with it. You can enjoy quiet pasture, cool streams of refreshment and renewal, even in the face of the harsh realities of the life around you. Malcolm Muggeridge, some of you may have heard of him. He was a well-known journalist of the last century and a former atheist, confessed, I suppose, regard myself as being a relatively successful man. People occasionally look at me on the street. That's fame. I can fairly easily earn enough to qualify for the highest slopes of inland revenue. That's success. Furnished with money and a little fame, even the elderly, if they care to, can partake of trendy diversions. That's pleasure. It might happen once in a while that something I said or wrote was sufficiently heeded to impact on our time. That's fulfillment. Yet I say to you, and I beg of you to believe me, multiply these tiny triumphs by 1,000,000 and add them all together, and they are nothing. Nothing less than nothing. A positive impediment measured against one draught of that living water that is offered to the spiritually hungry. In Tehillim 42, verses 1 and 2, Melech David wrote, as the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul longs for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When can I go and meet with God? Take time to be with God and make it quality time. Read his words written to you and allow them to touch your heart and illuminate your mind and your spirit. Commune with him in prayer. Seek his face and strive to do his will in accordance with Torah, following the example of those who have gone before us, including Melech David, Moshe, Yeshayahu, and Yochanan. Like David, learn to still and quiet your heart. Put aside the cares, the stresses, and the anxieties of your life and allow God, allow him to heal the wounds of the past, to bring comfort and joy and peace to your heart and to your life. Wait upon God. Allow him the time to speak to you when he is ready. Worship God. Worship him when you're alone, and come and join with us to worship him. Worship him as Creator, King, Lord, and Shepherd. Worship him as the one who longs for you, and become the one who longs for him. He is your shepherd. Turn to him now. Shabbat Shalom, and I hope that your Shabbat and your week ahead will be blessed.